As a friend of God, as Abraham lived in fellowship with God, God considered him to be his friend. The conversation between Abraham and God in this chapter resembles that between two friends. This happened by the oaks of Mamre in Hebron, where Abraham lived according to God's pleasure. The name Hebron in Hebrew means fellowship, communion, and friendship. It was at this place of fellowship and friendship that God came to visit Abraham as a friend. And Abraham welcomed God as a friend, preparing water for God to wash his feet for his refreshment, and feeding God with a rich meal for his satisfaction. Abraham did all this in the intimate fellowship with his friend at his tent door under the shadow of the oak trees, not in the religious worship of God in a cathedral or sanctuary under the service of a priest or minister. When Abraham was sitting in the tent door to cool himself in the heat of the day, God appeared to him with the two angels. When he saw them approaching, he ran to welcome them and asked them to stay with him. He prepared water for them to wash their feet and served them a rich meal of 3 cakes of fine wheat flour baked on embers, a tender and good calf, and butter and milk. In ancient times, 3 measures or 3 seahs were the equivalent of an ephah. According to 1 Samuel chapter 1 verse 24 and Judges chapter 6 verse 19, the normal portion of a meal was an ephah of fine flour. Why then does chapter 18 verse 6, like Matthew chapter 13 verse 33, mention 3 measures, not 1 ephah? Because in both Genesis 18 and Matthew 13, 3 measures of fine flour signify the resurrected Christ in his humanity. Such a Christ is the fine flour baked into cakes to be food for both God and man. Abraham also prepared a tender calf. This calf, like the fatted calf used to feed the prodigal son in Luke chapter 15 verse 23, was also a figure of Christ. Abraham also served God and the angels butter and milk. God drank the milk of the good land much earlier than the children of Israel did. The cakes, the calf, and the butter and milk all signify the riches of the all-inclusive Christ for the satisfaction of both God and man. Although the Bible does not say that Abraham presented this meal to God as an offering, in actuality he did so. Years later, when the children of Israel went to their yearly feast, they offered God the produce of the good land, offering him the produce of either the vegetable or animal life. In principle, Abraham did the same thing in Genesis 18. Whenever we enjoy a good time with God, having intimate fellowship with him, at that time Christ not only is supplied to us, but we offer Christ to God, offering him the riches of Christ for his enjoyment. In other words, we offer Christ to God as 3 measures of fine flour, as a tender and good calf, and as butter and milk. Thank the Lord that we have had at least some experience of this. While we were enjoying intimate fellowship with God, we not only received Christ from God, but also offered Christ to God as God's food. We offered Christ in his resurrected humanity as 3 measures of fine flour. We offered Christ as the tender and good calf, and we presented all the riches of Christ to God for his enjoyment. A good number of times at the Lord's table, I have not enjoyed the Lord as much as when I have offered Christ to God for God's enjoyment. When guests come to visit you in your house, you do not expect them to feed you. Rather, you enjoy feeding them. The sisters especially enjoy serving a meal and watching the guests eat it. The more the guests eat, the happier the sisters are. We all need to be in such an intimate fellowship with God that we not only enjoy Christ, but also offer Christ to God for his enjoyment. The highest fellowship is not when we enjoy Christ so much before God, but when God enjoys him in us more than we do. The highest and richest meeting in the church is the meeting in which we offer Christ to God for his satisfaction. Receiving revelation from God. As Abraham was enjoying such sweet fellowship with God, he received revelation from him regarding the birth of Isaac and the destruction of Sodom. These are the two basic things concerning which God will always deal with us. The birth of Isaac is related to Christ, and the destruction of Sodom is related to God's judgment upon sin. Isaac must come and Sodom must go. This means that Christ must come in and sin must go out. Today, God is not only accomplishing his plan to fulfill his purpose, but as the Lord over all men, he is also judging his sin. The principle is the same in every aspect of our lives. In our married life, home life, personal life, Christian life, and church life, God's concern is to bring Christ forth through us and to eliminate all the sinful things. He intends to produce Christ and to destroy the Sodom in our home life, work life, and even in our Christian and church life. All the revelation that we have received and shall receive from God mostly concerns these two items. If you consider your own experience, you will find that this is so. Whenever you have received revelation from God during the course of your fellowship with Him, it has always concerned Christ on the positive side and sin on the negative side. Positively, we see more of Christ and say, I have seen something new of Christ. How I hate that I have not lived more by him. This is the revelation regarding the birth of Isaac. The revelation that Christ will be brought forth in your life. But negatively, we see our sins and say, Oh Lord, forgive me. There's still so much selfishness, hatred, and jealousy in me. I have so many failures, shortcomings, and even sinful things. Lord, I judge these things and want them destroyed. This, in principle, is God's judgment upon the destruction of sin. In our Christian life, Christ must be brought in and Sodom must be destroyed. Likewise, in the church life, Christ must increase and sin must be abolished. Concerning the birth of Isaac through Sarah, the promise confirmed. How can Christ be brought forth? Firstly, there is the promise. The promise made to Abraham regarding the birth of Isaac in chapter 17 verse 19 and 21 was confirmed in chapter 18 verse 10. Not only did God promise Abraham that he would give birth to Isaac through Sarah, but in the whole Bible, especially in the New Testament, there is the rich promise concerning Christ. We have the promise that Christ will be our life, our supply, and our everything. How much the New Testament promises concerning Christ. All these promises can be fulfilled by the gracious visitation of Christ, of God. At the time of life, the appointed time, the birth of Isaac was at the time of life, at the appointed time. Christ always has been and always will be increased in us and brought forth through us at the time of life. We need to have many such times of life. I would like to have one every day. The time of life is always the appointed time, the time appointed by God. God made the appointment, not Abraham. It's the same with us today, for it is God who makes the appointments, not you and I. Our past experiences will help us to understand this. Whenever God comes to visit us to bring forth Christ, that time is the appointed time, the time of life. Abraham becoming old and dead, and Sarah becoming out of function. The time of life for Abraham and Sarah was the time when they had become nothing. Isaac was born when Abraham had become old as dead, and Sarah had become out of function. Likewise, whenever we become nothing, that is a good time, a divinely appointed time for us to participate in moral life.